Hey guys, welcome to Road to Thai Nationals. This week is a deload week for me. As you could have guessed from the last video, I was completely exhausted. And since training is not going to be quite interesting this week, I just want to share with you guys some of my thoughts on deload, अनि कहिले लिने deload भनेको के हो, कसरी लिने, अनि how you should go about taking a deload, and also some of the misconceptions of a deload, and hopefully you learned something in the video. Obviously, if you want your training to be more organized, you can hire me as your coach so that I can do everything for you without the thinking part, and put deloads and everything accordingly, or you can hire any strength coach or any coach who knows what they're doing. So let's get into the topic of the video. So deload भनेको के हो for some of you guys who don't understand. Obviously I'll put timestamps so that you can skip forward. Anyways, what is deload? So deload भनेको is a complete microcycle. Microcycle is mostly a week of training that is slightly easier than what you are currently doing, either with a reduction in training volume or a reduction in training load. It's with the purpose of deloading your body from all the extra stresses that you're creating, because training is a stressor. Training not only physically strains you but also psychologically, mentally पनि अलिकति it's fatiguing. So त्यसबाट हल्का stress free गरेर then you're ready to transition into a new mesocycle, or you're ready to start your meet prep or your Zeus transition phase. Just deload is normally treated, and that's the main purpose. So deload ko time kaile आउँछ त? So it's after a big accumulation phase that the deload is in the end, and then you can transition. So accumulation phase भनेको के हो? So accumulation phase भनेको चाहिँ is like you're slowly accumulating more training volume as you progress forward in your mesocycle. So you start your mesocycle at the minimum most effective volume, and then you gradually increase it up to, like weekly we increase it up to a point where you can almost not recover, and then just before you start losing reps, that's the time we put deload. Normally accumulation phases, I wouldn't recommend doing anything less than 3 weeks of accumulation before you get a deload, but यो कुरा चाहिँ it's highly variable depending on the person, type of training you're doing, but never less than 3 weeks. And for beginners, it's less likely that you need a deload that often. So सुरुमा like भर्खरै आउने beginnersहरूलाई I sometimes go even 16-20 weeks without a deload, because they can keep progressing linearly weeks on end, and if I give them a deload for no reason, then they will only be limiting themselves of more growth than they can actually get. तर 3 weeks भन्दा कम्ती चाहिँ accumulation किन नगर्ने? Why don't we just train to failure and then deload the next week भन्दाखेरि चाहिँ effective reps is like a big word, and there's a lot of literature which I haven't seen, and I haven't done my reading part. So effective reps भन्नु मिल्दैन. I don't want to use the word effective reps, but in general you can get the equal amount of stimulus to hypertrophy or strength by training within 4 to 5 reps in reserve. So if you start the mesocycle with 6 reps in reserve, then you can progress gradually up to 10, and then that'll be at least 4 weeks of mesocycle right there. So if you train the first week at failure, there's no, unless you're a complete beginner, there's very little possibility then the next week then you'll have the energy to do even more weight, and even then it'll not be very sustainable in the long run. Injuries and all those sort of things huncha. So at least 3 weeks long huncha, and then like for me it's normally 3 to like 6 to 8 weeks depending on the phase of training that we're doing. तर कसरी चाहिँ थाहा पाउने त deload कहिले चाहिन्छ भनेर? So that's the biggest question. First thing, you should always be recording all the training data you have, like कसरी progression गरिरहेको थियो अनि कुन बेलादेखि then you started losing reps, and over time you'll have a perfect idea about how you should go about your training, like because we don't change so much that fast, and most humans are similar, then they're different. So धेरै जस्तो मान्छेलाई similar like time नै लागिरह हुन्छ के, like accumulation to deload phases गर्दाखेरि, like person A लाई 13.5 days, person B लाई 16.8 days, त्यस्तो हुँदैन. So it's mostly very similar, just depending on the type of individual you're dealing with, and eventually like थाहा पाउँदै जान्छ, but it's very important for you to have the data. So one of the bigger reasons how you know that you're deloading is, if you're not lazy, is when you start to lose repetitions on a given movement. So I'll give you an example of my bench press from last week and this week. This week is a deload week. So last week I did 4 sets of 10 at 92.5 kgs, and you can see how smooth even the eighth rep is compared to the deload week, which by the eighth rep I'm already kind of slowing down. So last week, but if I had made more progression, maybe 5 sets of 10 or 4 sets of 11 गरेको भए, there was very little chance that I would be able to do the job, because yo week I'm fatigued so much that I cannot produce the same force as last week. So this is a perfect week for me to deload. But you also notice that the reduction in weight is not so much from last week. So that's one of the ideas. Other ideas is like your muscles are exceptionally sore. Last week ko jati volume gare with slightly more weight. Last week केही भएको थिएन, but this week you're starting to feel the fatigue, and next week is probably the right time for you to deload. But there are a lot of physical cues. Why is it important? It's important because if you don't take deloads, your body is going to do it for you in terms of injury. बेसी ट्रेन गरेर बिरामी हुने, रुगा खोकी लाग्ने, training motivation नै जाने, like you just get physically burnt out. So deloads हाम्रो bodyले लिदिहाल्छ anyways, so it's better if you give it just before the time you actually need to give. आजकल like there are a lot of fancy ways of calling a deload. So deload भन्छ कसैले pivot भन्छ, transition phase भन्छ. All those things are cool, but the main idea of a deload is to reduce fatigue mentally and both physically. Taper week मा चाहिँ I've already made a 10-minute video, so you can go check that out. I'll also link it in the description if you want to find out what a taper is. But deload भनेको त मैले भनिहालेँ, but pivot भनेको चाहिँ is something that I haven't quite tried yet for myself, but I've been implementing it with some of my athletes. So because training gets stale, so pivot week मा चाहिँ we do some things that we haven't done in a while with slightly lowered volume than what we're normally doing. So different exercises, अब high bar गराछ भने low bar गराउने, sumo deadlifter like conventional गराउने. So it changes up अलिकति and then you feel more refreshed. So I've been trying it out with a couple of my athletes, but I'm not I don't have a verdict whether it's better than a traditional deload. But for me, my coach programs me the traditional way of deloading, and that's what I've been doing. But I'll let you guys know as time goes on. So deload, like let's get to the main part of the video. I hope you understand what deload is by now. So how do I program deloads into a training program? So I look at this mesocycle र अर्को mesocycle कस्तो छ. So यो mesocycle मा if I'm doing sets of 8s, and in next mesocycles ma I want to shift into a set of 5, then my deload strategy would be slightly different. Like my deload ma pani I would like the transition phase type go 8s, where I would cut the reps into something that's lower in volume than the last week, but so that I can like jump right into sets of 5 next week. But in some cases, like कहिलेकाहीँ sets of 8 बाट next week training block मा पनि I'm gonna start with sets of 8. So त्यस्तो हुँदाखेरि चाहिँ I just reduce the volume of the same set. So sets of 8 गराछ and I would still do sets of 8, but maybe cut out one set in total. So generally it's a reduction about 60 to 70% of the training volume from the last week of the accumulation phase. So एकदमै सजिलो training पनि हुँदैन, because since you're fatigued, even those workouts are gonna be quite challenging. And हाम्रो purpose of every training should be to get better in some ways at least. त्यो deload को exercise also won't be very easy, but we can focus on improving our technical prowess. Like अलिअलि muscle पनि build हुन्छ because we're under so much fatigue that those reps are effective reps. Different athletes हेरेर volume reduction is slightly different, but in general if you just got 60% of the volume, that should be alright. But more sometimes depending on the athlete, like first half of the week I reduce 70%, second half I go more aggressive like 50%. So balance गरेर 60 नै भइरहेको हुन्छ. So कसरी, so for my case here, मेरो coachले पनि he deducted 60% volume. So last week I did 4 sets of 10 at a given amount of weight. Your week I'm doing 3 sets of 8 at a given amount of reps. So 40 reps total को 60% deduct गर्दाखेरि the amount of reps that I'm doing. So that's one way to do it. On assistant movements, if you're doing sets of, like for me, like I don't calculate so much because I know what their minimum adaptive volume के हो. It's a 4 गरिरहेछ भने I just make it sets of 3, 2 गरिरहेछ भने 1, 5 गरिरहेछ भने 4. Like I just reduce it by one set for the assistance movements. Now let's talk about the misconceptions. One of the many misconceptions that I've heard is like complete rest गर्नु नै is better than trying to do नसकी पनि, and which makes sense up to a point in terms of fatigue deviation, भनौँ न fatigue हटाउनुलाई that could be a very good idea. But the thing is, when you get back to training, you're gonna be so sore again, and I hate having those sore days, हुन्छ नि, like not being able to walk again. Some of you guys like it, but once you've been doing it for long enough and you understand the science behind soreness is not soreness has very little correlation with muscle hypertrophy and strength, and you don't tend to like soreness so much. So complete rest गर्नु पनि is not ideal. Also that you lose gains, like train गरेन भने then you lose gains भनेर people misinterpret what the scientific literature has to say. So normally, even without any training, you won't reduce your strength or muscle size within 2 weeks or even 3 weeks, depending on the individual. And since we're doing like power type exercise, like because lower reps, lower intensity नै भयो भने पनि we're still using power to move the weight. So त्यस्तो हुँदाखेरि the decay rates are slower down, maybe even like 3 to 5 weeks मा पनि you don't lose strength and size. So that's another myth debunked. So you shouldn't be worried about losing your gains in 1 week. Muscles are अलिअलि flat, like because it's tired, त्यस्तो हुन सक्छ, but it won't reduce the total body mass of your body. And obviously there are more benefits than there are disadvantages. First of all, injury prevention. So if you're always constantly pushing yourself beyond what you're capable of, which we should do once in a while, like the end of a meso or end of a heavy training block, but every week त्यस्तो गर्दाखेरि you're exposing yourself to more injuries and all those sort of things. So being fresh again once in a while is a very good option. When you're just starting out, you don't get really burnt out, but once you get to a point, then you get physically, mentally burnt out because of the amount of training that you have to do to make even little progress. So it will re-energize you to ignite the fire to train again. So those are the benefits of deloading. Anyways guys, thank you all so much for watching this video. I'm sure you learned a few things about deloading. Like I said, if you want it to be more organized and you don't want to get into all the details, you can hire me as your coach and I can help you organize your training better. Reach out to me through my email or Instagram, and that's basically it guys for this video. If you have any questions regarding training, any questions regarding my goals and how I do certain things, please feel free to leave them in the comments down below, because the purpose of this channel is to interact with you guys, and I want to make content that you guys will enjoy watching. Also, if there's any feedback or suggestions or improvements that I can make, please let me know, and I will see you all next time.